Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The sun was setting gently over the small town of Richmond, Virginia, casting long shadows on the streets still bustling with a few hurried passers-by. On the corner of Fifth Avenue, the municipal police station stood like a stark, cold building, its red brick walls and barred windows inspiring both respect and intimidation. Inside, the air was thick with tension and the smells of spilled coffee and damp paper. Marcus Johnson, a 32-year-old black man, entered the lobby calmly, wearing a crisp blue shirt and a light coat. His gaze was determined yet serene. An upright man, the son of a teacher and a nurse, Marcus had learned from childhood the value of dignity and patience in the face of injustice. Behind the counter, Officer Richard Conway, a broad-shouldered white man in his 40s with a hard stare, watched Marcus suspiciously. Conway didn't like seeing men like Marcus walk through his precinct as if they were entitled to equal treatment. He was known for his arrogance, his sarcastic remarks, and his tendency to impose his will by force. No sooner had Marcus crossed the threshold than Conway raised an eyebrow, a cold smile playing on his lips. "What are you doing here, Johnson?" he snapped, his voice thick with condescension. Marcus replied calmly, "I came to clear up an administrative misunderstanding, officer. I haven't done anything wrong." But Conway wouldn't listen. In his mind, Marcus represented everything he despised, the respect he refused to grant, the dignity no one could impose upon him. He took a step toward him, his imposing figure seeming to fill the entire hall, and murmured, "We'll see if you respect authority here." The air hung heavy. The other officers, some accustomed to Conway's arrogance, others simply taken aback by his sudden violence, instinctively stepped back. Marcus sensed the threat, but his composure remained undiminished. He knew that giving in to fear would be playing into Conway's hands, and he refused to do so. At that precise moment, for no apparent reason, Conway raised his hand and struck Marcus on the shoulder, a violent and gratuitous gesture. The sound echoed through the silent lobby. Several witnesses present, employees and visitors alike, stopped what they were doing and turned toward the scene. A murmur rippled through the room, a mixture of indignation and surprise. Marcus, slightly unsteady but still dignified, took a few steps back and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" "I haven't done anything." Conway's cruel smile widened, satisfied with his perceived superiority. He thought he had instilled fear, but he didn't know that every move was being recorded by security cameras. That day, the confrontation between arrogance and dignity had just begun, and no one at the police station could yet imagine how much this altercation would change everyone's lives. Marcus Johnson pushed open the door of the police station and immediately felt the artificial coolness of the air conditioning. The vast, austere lobby was lit by pale fluorescent lights that accentuated the stark lines of the white walls. A few people were waiting behind the counter, some impatiently, others lost in thought. Marcus walked forward calmly, adjusting his shirt. He knew his every move would be watched, analyzed. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from anticipation of the confrontation that seemed inevitable. He had heard of Officer Conway, a police officer with an explosive temper, often accused of abuse of power. But Marcus couldn't afford to run from injustice. Behind the counter, Conway looked up. His cold eyes fixed on Marcus, a mixture of contempt and defiance in his gaze. "You again?" he growled, his voice echoing through the hall like a warning. Marcus replied calmly, "I'm here to clear up an administrative misunderstanding, Officer Conway. Nothing more." Conway sneered, a dry, cold sound. "You know, here, everyone has to show respect for authority. And you? I don't know if you understand that." He took a step toward Marcus, imposing his stature. The hall seemed to shrink beneath him. The other officers present watched the scene with visible discomfort. Some avoided Conway's gaze, others clenched their jaws, aware that the situation could quickly escalate. Marcus stood straight, his chin slightly raised, his eyes calm but determined. He knew that giving in to intimidation would be Conway's first victory. "I came here to cooperate, officer. I'm not looking for any conflict." But Conway, feeling his ego bruised, wouldn't listen. He moved forward abruptly and tried to push Marcus against the counter. The impact was slight, but enough to make Marcus flinch. "Watch out, Johnson," Conway murmured menacingly. At that moment, several witnesses exchanged worried glances. Even some of Conway's colleagues seemed uneasy. Marcus took a deep breath, gathering all his composure. He knew that an impulsive reaction could worsen the situation. "Please stop. I'm here to solve the problem, not to cause trouble." Conway, frustrated by this apparent calm, frowned. This wasn't the kind of submission he was used to seeing. His pride was hurting, and his arrogance wouldn't allow him to accept Marcus's refusal to back down. The scene was set, two men, two worlds, ready to clash, and a police station silently witnessing this duel between intimidation and dignity. Marcus knew that this day would demand all his courage, but he was determined not to let Conway's arrogance define his fate. The air in the halls suddenly felt heavier, thick with the growing tension between Marcus and Conway. Each of Conway's steps echoed on the tiled floor, like a warning. The other officers looked away, some visibly uncomfortable, while visitors sitting on the benches seemed to hold their breath. "You think you can just show up here and do whatever you want?" Conway snapped, his fists clenched. The veins in his neck pulsed with the excitement of the confrontation. Marcus, his hands calmly at his sides, replied in a firm but controlled voice, "I came here to resolve an administrative issue, officer. I haven't done anything wrong, and I'm not looking for a confrontation." Conway sneered, a dry, cruel sound. "Oh, you think your politeness will protect me? Here, I'm the one who decides." He took a step towards Marcus, trying to intimidate him with his imposing stature. Marcus stepped back slightly, just enough to keep his distance. His gaze betrayed no fear. "I don't want any trouble. I just want this handled properly." But Conway wouldn't listen. With a sudden movement, he shoved Marcus against the counter. The impact sent some papers scattering to the floor and startled the onlookers. Marcus remained upright despite the violence, but his eyes shone with a restrained intensity. He would not succumb to gratuitous arrogance. "You think you can challenge me?" Conway spat, raising a threatening finger. Marcus took a step back, remaining calm, but his voice rang firm. "I'm not challenging you, officer. I'm simply asking to be treated with respect." "That's not too much to ask." At that moment, Officer Lisa Thompson, a colleague of Conway's known for her impartiality, intervened. "Richard, stop this. It's unnecessary. He hasn't done anything." Conway turned to her irritably, his arrogance rejecting all criticism. "Stay out of it, Lisa. You don't understand the situation." Marcus observed the scene, aware that every move could trigger an escalation. He took a deep breath and calmly continued, "If you continue, we're going to create a problem that could affect us all. I don't mean to embarrass you, officer, but I won't stand idly by in the face of violence." The entire hall seemed to hang on their every move. Each witness felt the chill of injustice, but also Marcus's quiet strength. Conway, frustrated by this unexpected calm, raised his voice and took a more aggressive step. "You'll learn what it means to disrespect me." This was the turning point. Conway's arrogance and violence were about to erupt. Marcus knew that the outcome of this confrontation would depend on his patience and composure. The police station lobby was now thick with almost palpable tension. Every witness held their breath as Conway advanced menacingly towards Marcus. His fists were clenched, his jaw tight, and his eyes burned with uncontrollable anger. "You think your politeness is going to impress me?" he growled, his voice echoing off the white walls. Marcus remained motionless, not flinching. His composure seemed almost provocative to Conway, who wasn't used to meeting someone who refused to give in to his intimidation. As Marcus tried to maintain control of the situation with words, Conway completely lost it. With a brutal gesture, he struck Marcus on the shoulder, a clean and deliberate blow. The impact made Marcus stumble backward, and a murmur of indignation rippled through the room. Papers fell to the floor, some scattering onto the shoes of the visitors and officers present. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but full of reproach. I haven't done anything. I'm here to cooperate. Conway sneered, a dry, cruel laugh. That's the lesson, Johnson. Here, I'm the one who decides. He raised his fist a second time, ready to strike, when Officer Lisa Thompson stepped between them. Enough, Richard, she said authoritatively. This isn't necessary. He hasn't done anything. Stop immediately. Conway glared at her, irritated that anyone would dare challenge his authority. But the mere sight of Marcus, standing tall and dignified despite the violence, provoked an unexpected reaction in the lobby. The visitors, who had been silent until then, exchanged shocked glances. A few employees whispered amongst themselves, expressing their disapproval of Conway's behavior. Marcus, though slightly unbalanced by the blow, remained motionless. He took a deep breath and said in a firm voice, I'm not challenging you, officer. But this behavior is unfair. You can't treat someone like this. The contrast between Conway's furious arrogance and Marcus's calm dignity seemed almost unreal. Conway, overcome with rage, raised his fist again, but this time he realized his gesture had not had the desired effect. Marcus did not back down and showed no fear. The situation reached a critical point. Security cameras were recording every movement, every expression. The murmurs in the lobby turned into open consternation. Conway felt control slipping away, but his pride refused to budge. The shock wasn't just physical, it was an affront to his authority, and he wasn't prepared to accept being challenged. Marcus, however, knew that patience and composure were his most powerful allies. He waited calmly, ready to face any escalation, confident that justice and common sense would ultimately prevail. The lobby of the police station still vibrated with the tension of Conway's final blow. The air seemed heavy, thick with the silent indignation of the employees and visitors present. Some murmured amongst themselves, others exchanged alarmed glances, unable to believe that a police officer could act with such brutality without reason. Did you see that? Murmured a visitor in a low voice, casting a disapproving glance at Conway. It's outrageous. Officer Lisa Thompson, still standing near Marcus, frowned and said firmly, Richard, that's enough. You can't treat someone like that. It's not your role. Conway grunted, his arrogance bruised by these remarks. He was used to his colleagues either looking away or agreeing with him, and this refusal to submit to his authority frustrated him intensely. Stay out of it, Lisa. You don't know what it's like to keep order around here. But Marcus's effect on the entire hall was beginning to be felt. The previously passive bystanders now felt emboldened by the calm and dignity of the black man who had been struck without reason. Several of Conway's colleagues exchanged glances, some shook their heads in disapproval, while others, more cautious, remained silent but visibly uncomfortable. Marcus, still standing with a direct and calm gaze, took a step forward and said in a measured but firm voice, You are losing control, Officer Conway. Your responsibility is to protect, not to strike people. What you are doing here is unjust and unacceptable. This simple reminder of responsibility caused a murmur in the lobby. The visitors and employees present began to openly express their displeasure. Some discreetly took out their phones to report the situation, while others tried to calm Conway down. Tensions rose when Captain David Reynolds, Conway's direct superior, suddenly entered the hall. His scrutinizing gaze immediately fell upon the scene. He had heard of Conway's arrogance, but what he was seeing surpassed his worst expectations. Richard, stop immediately. Reynolds ordered, his voice echoing throughout the hall. Conway hesitated, surprised that his superior was intervening so quickly. Marcus didn't move, his calm contrasting sharply with Conway's excitement and anger. For the first time, Conway's arrogance began to crack. He realized that his behavior was no longer tolerated, and that the witnesses around him wouldn't support him. The entire precinct seemed to be turning against him, while Marcus remained the unwavering figure of dignity and courage. The hall, witness to this injustice, now became the scene of a subtle but powerful reversal of power, Conway's uncontrolled arrogance versus Marcus's quiet and implacable strength. The police station lobby was now electric. Captain David Reynolds' arrival had instantly changed the dynamic. A man respected for his integrity and rigor, Reynolds was known for upholding justice and never turning a blind eye to abuse. "Richard Conway, step back immediately and explain to me what's going on here," Reynolds ordered, his voice firm and authoritative. Conway, surprised, stiffened. His usual arrogance seemed to waver in the face of his superior's undisputed authority. Marcus, still standing, remained calm and respectful. "Captain Reynolds, I did nothing wrong. I was here to clear up a simple administrative misunderstanding, and Officer Conway assaulted me for no reason." Reynolds stared intently at Conway. "Is that true?" he asked. Conway attempted a forced smile, but his pride and frustration shone through. That's an overreaction, Captain. I just wanted to maintain order." "Maintaining order by hitting someone for no reason?" Reynolds retorted, his voice sharp. He turned to Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, you are safe here. No one will harm you. I will make sure this situation is handled properly." Conway's gaze hardened, but he understood that his behavior had just attracted the attention of someone capable of neutralizing him. The security cameras, which had recorded everything, would provide irrefutable evidence. Conway's arrogance collided with a reality he could no longer control. Reynolds signaled Conway to stay in his place and ordered a neutral officer to begin drafting an official report on the incident. He added, "We will not tolerate abuse of power here. What you just did is unacceptable." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The calm and dignity he had maintained until now were beginning to pay off. Conway, for the first time, felt the fear and humiliation that accompany the loss of control and responsibility for one's actions. The witnesses in the hall began to murmur with relief and admiration. The situation, which had seemed to be heading towards a violent escalation, was now taking an unexpected turn. The man who had wanted to impose his law by violence found himself under the stern gaze of a moral and legal authority, and Marcus was protected by this intervention. For Marcus, this moment represented more than a personal victory. It was proof that patience, composure, and dignity could reverse even the most dangerous situations, and that injustice never triumphs when truth and courage are on one side. The police station, still thick with tension, now viewed Conway from a completely different perspective. The man who, just minutes before, had ruled through fear, was now frozen, watched by every eye. Even the visitors, until then silent, whispered, "Did you see that? He hit someone for no reason." Reynolds, standing before Conway, showed no sign of weakness. "Richard, you will write a full report on this incident, and it must be honest. Every detail, every gesture, every word you uttered will be recorded." Conway felt his ego falter. He had always believed that his rank and status gave him the right to act as he pleased. Now, the arrogance he had cultivated was turning against him, under the watchful eyes of his colleagues and Marcus. Marcus, calm and dignified, observed without saying a word. His composure contrasted sharply with Conway's visible nervousness. Every glance from the witnesses seemed to strengthen Marcus's position and diminish that of the arrogant officer. A few visitors discreetly took photos and videos with their phones, capturing Conway's humiliation for use as evidence if needed. Even some officers, previously silent, shook their heads in disapproval, aware that Conway's arrogance had just crossed an invisible line. "Do you still think you're above the rules?" Reynolds asked, his sharp voice echoing in the hall. Conway had no answer. His usual words of intimidation and justification suddenly seemed ridiculous and empty. Reynolds continued, "We will open an internal investigation. In the meantime, you are suspended from your duties. I want everyone here to understand that power does not give the right to abuse it." For the first time, Conway felt the weight of his actions. The man who had thought he could humiliate Marcus with impunity found himself exposed, judged by his peers, and confronted with the real consequences of his behavior. The humiliation wasn't just in front of Marcus, but in front of the entire police station and the witnesses who had seen his violence. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that the balance had just shifted. His calm and dignity had transformed the situation, Conway's arrogance was turning against him, and justice was beginning to prevail. The lobby of the police station, a silent witness to the confrontation, now resonated with a simple but powerful truth: gratuitous violence and arrogance can never triumph over patience, dignity, and justice. The lobby of the police station, still buzzing from the incident, seemed to breathe a mixture of relief and quiet admiration. Conway, sitting on a chair near the counter, avoided all eye contact. His arrogance had given way to obvious nervousness. His colleagues watched him in silence, some with a mixture of suspicion and judgment. Marcus, for his part, remained standing straight, head held high. He showed neither resentment nor anger, only a quiet dignity that amplified the effect of Conway's humiliation. His composure contrasted sharply with the officer's agitation and captured the attention of all the witnesses. "Thank you, Captain Reynolds," Marcus said, his voice calm but sincere, "for acting quickly and ensuring the situation was handled properly." Reynolds nodded, a slight, approving smile on his face. Conway, unable to reply, simply clenched his fists on his knees. The silence in the hall was heavy. Every movement Marcus made, every word he spoke calmly, reminded everyone of the power of self-control. A few officers discreetly came to congratulate Marcus, expressing their support and admiration for his dignity. The visitors, impressed, murmured among themselves, acknowledging the courage of the man who had refused to give in to fear or intimidation. Even Conway felt, deep down, that his position had been definitively compromised. He had tried to impose his superiority through violence, but against Marcus, his behavior proved useless, not only ineffective, but humiliating. Marcus took one last step toward Conway, calmly placing his hand on the counter a few inches from the officer. "I hope this situation serves as a lesson. Intimidation and violence are not part of authority. You must understand this if you want your role to have meaning." Conway lowered his eyes, unable to reply. Marcus, without animosity, turned to Captain Reynolds and said, "I am ready to fully cooperate with the investigation. I want everything to be transparent." The hall seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's quiet strength had not only turned the tide, but had also inspired respect and reflection. Witnesses, colleagues, and even Conway now understood that true power lies not in violence, but in self-control and dignity. As Marcus slowly left the hall to finalize the paperwork, he left behind a feeling of impending justice and renewed respect. Conway, on the other hand, now had to face the consequences of his arrogance and actions, in humiliation and self-doubt. The next morning, the police station seemed unusually quiet. The commotion and tension of the previous day had given way to an atmosphere heavy with suspicion and anticipation. Conway, still suspended, sat in Captain Reynolds' office, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. His face betrayed worry for the first time. "Richard, we're going to review every detail of this incident. The cameras recorded everything, and several witnesses have already given their accounts," Reynolds announced, his expression stern. "I want you to be honest. Any attempt to cover it up will be considered further grounds for disciplinary action." Conway swallowed hard. He had always believed he could manipulate the situation, hide his abuse behind his authority and arrogance. But the evidence was irrefutable. The videos clearly showed his violent actions, and the witnesses had described them precisely. Even his neutral colleagues couldn't ignore the obvious. Meanwhile, Marcus, ever calm and dignified, was fully cooperating with the investigation. He had provided a comprehensive statement, detailing every interaction, every word, and every gesture. His professionalism stood in stark contrast to Conway's increasingly nervous demeanor as the evidence mounted. The officers in charge of the internal investigation were reviewing the videos and gathering witness statements. Each clip strengthened Marcus's position and made Conway's situation harder to defend. His arrogance, which had led him to strike an innocent man, was now turning into isolation and silent condemnation from his peers. Reynolds looked Conway straight in the eyes. "Richard, you lost control yesterday. You abused your power, and we're going to make sure that never happens again. Your actions will have consequences, and they will be proportionate to the seriousness of your actions." Conway remained silent, unable to reply. His world of arrogance had just crumbled. Marcus, on the other hand, stood still, letting justice take its course. The strength of his composure and dignity illuminated the divide between those who seek violence to dominate and those who use courage and patience to triumph. The internal investigation quickly became the talk of the precinct. The murmurs of officers and visitors underscored a simple yet powerful truth: truth and integrity always triumph over arrogance and brutality. Conway, for the first time, understood that his position and his behavior were not invincible. Marcus, leaving the office after providing all the necessary information, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not only defended his dignity, but had also served as a lesson to those who believe that violence and arrogance can intimidate or dominate indefinitely. A few days later, the police station was abuzz with activities surrounding the internal investigation. Testimonies had multiplied, security footage had been reviewed repeatedly, and the truth was becoming unavoidable. Conway, sitting alone in his office, felt the weight of humiliation bearing down on him like an invisible wall. Colleagues who had once admired or feared him now averted their eyes or whispered behind his back. Every step he took in the corridors seemed to echo his past behavior. The arrogant and violent man he had believed himself invincible found himself isolated and watched, aware that his every move was being scrutinized. Reynolds entered the office carrying a thick file. "Richard, the conclusions are clear. Your behavior is unacceptable and does not reflect the standards of this precinct. You will be severely disciplined, and this matter will be placed on your permanent record." Conway remained silent. He felt anger and shame intertwine in his chest. His arrogance, which he had always considered a sign of power, was now turning against him, revealing his vulnerability and his inability to control his own impulses. Meanwhile, Marcus, whose dignity had remained intact throughout the incident, continued his life serenely. Colleagues and visitors who had witnessed the assault or heard about the case were beginning to recognize his courage and quiet strength. His composure and adherence to the rules had not only turned the tide but had also earned him widespread respect. Conway, for his part, realized that his reputation had been irreparably damaged. The sanctions would not only affect his career, but also his authority and his image among those he had once dominated through fear. Every recollection of the day's events brought him back to the harsh truth: arrogance and gratuitous violence may seem powerful in the moment, but they always end up backfiring on the one who wields them. The murmurs in the police station turned into a silent lesson for all the officers: true power lies not in intimidation, but in self-control, integrity, and respect for others. Conway had just learned this lesson the hard way, while Marcus was now recognized as an example of courage and dignity. Justice had triumphed, not through vengeance, but through patience, composure, and moral strength. Conway finally understood that his arrogance had been his greatest weakness, and that true authority was measured by how one treated those who could not retaliate. A few weeks after the incident, the Richmond police station was gradually returning to calm. The tensions that had shaken the corridors and the lobby seemed to have dissipated, but the lesson of arrogance and dignity remained etched in everyone's memory. Conway, whose file had been updated with severe sanctions, was now performing administrative tasks under supervision. His arrogance had been shaken, and he understood that his actions had irreversible consequences. Colleagues who had once seen him as authoritarian and domineering no longer viewed him in the same way. Every interaction was tinged with caution and mistrust. Marcus, for his part, continued his life with the same dignity and composure that had disarmed Conway. His patience, self-control, and courage had inspired widespread respect. He had not only defended his own dignity but had also helped to establish a lasting example of justice and moral conduct within the police station. Captain Reynolds paused to address the officers. "What happened here is a lesson for us all. True power lies not in fear, violence, or arrogance. It lies in respect, patience, and justice. Marcus Johnson has shown us that even in the face of injustice, dignity and composure can prevail." Murmurs of approval rippled through the hall. Marcus's story and his confrontation with Conway quickly became a cited example at the police station, a reminder that no one is above the rules and that blind arrogance always ends up backfiring on the one who wields it. Conway, humiliated but aware of the gravity of his actions, began to reflect on his behavior. Although his reputation was permanently tarnished, he understood that this setback could become a catalyst for change. The shame he felt was bitter, but necessary. For the first time, he considered altering his behavior, showing humility, and learning to respect others, regardless of their status or appearance. As Marcus left the police station that day, he felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice had not been served through violence or vengeance, but through truth, patience, and moral strength. His example would remain in memory as a reminder that arrogance, hatred, and violence can never triumph over dignity and justice. And in the now silent hall, the brick walls themselves seemed to have learned the lesson: courage and self-control are more powerful weapons than fear and intimidation. Conway had just learned this lesson the hard way, and Marcus emerged victorious, not through force, but through the quiet strength of his humanity.